What's up, guys? My name's Josh. Welcome back to episode number 6 of FAB 201. Good to see you guys, as always. Today we're going to be talking about Season 4 Blitz. We're going to be talking about the metagame. We're going to go over some deck lists. We're going to talk about some general strategies for each of the decks. And then I'm going to go over my Dark Horse pick for Season 4. So let's just jump right into that. So this weekend, I had the pleasure of playing, or last weekend I should say, I had the pleasure of playing in the Team Blitz event with my teammates Nathan Crawford and Alex Sneed, and we managed to take that down. And so that was the first time that we got to really see the Averfest Blitz meta. There was some surprises there, and we got to basically test the deck performances of Kaisa and Viscera in particular. And yeah, that was a really, really fun experience. That was kind of a unique format as well. And yeah, we managed to take it down, which was always a nice feeling. Got some cool playmats for that. So yeah, just wanted to talk briefly about that. But let's talk about some observations I had from that weekend, and just some of my general thoughts on that. So basically, there are certain metagame constraints in Blitz because you just bring 40 cards and you don't have a sideboard. You have an equipment sideboard, but you don't have a sideboard. So if you are lacking in a particular aspect, you can't shore that up as easily. So because of that, there are some constraints. So I thought about it a little bit, and this is kind of how I broke it down. That a deck in Blitz needs to have 3 things. It needs to have speed, it needs to have power, and it needs to have defense. And let's go over why you need each of these. Okay? The first metagame constraint is your deck needs speed. Why does your deck need speed? In particular because of 2 heroes. The first is Kano. If you give Kano a lot of time to set up, you let them get an energy potion out, you let them chip you down below, 14, 13 health or so, they're just going to kill you. Even if you have AB4. You have to put enough pressure on Kano. Preferably you are presenting lethal before their tunic even gets to 3. If you can do that, then you're in good shape. The other constraint is Viscera. If you're going too slow, Viscera can build up a bunch of rune chants and just kill you out of nowhere. It's also possible that even if the Viscera is not going for an OTK strategy, that they just draw into the correct 4-card hand that does a ton of damage because of Mordred Tide and Revel and Runeblood and all those powerhouse Viscera cards that you are very familiar with in CC. So because of that, your deck has to close the game in a reasonable fashion. Okay, so the second metagame constraint is that your deck needs power. So the reason your deck needs power is because of the Guardians in the format, namely Oldham and Bravo. If you just sit around and are presenting smallish amounts of damage and you don't have a spike turn, if you're presenting less than 12 damage a turn and your deck cannot reliably present at least 2 turns with at least 20 damage, then you're never going to break through an Oldham that's just blocking out. And you're going to get fatigued and you're going to lose, or you're going to go to time. Okay? So your deck needs to be able to have a giant pivot turn, preferably 2 during the game. Okay? The third metagame constraint is defense. So if you do not have enough defense, in particular I'm talking about armor, although things like Sink Below would also be nice, or staple cards like Soul Shield that you would just run. If you don't have enough defense, you will get OTK'd by Benji, or Dorinthia will tear you apart. They will tear you apart in different ways, but basically without a fridge and without defense reactions, you are going to have trouble dealing with those two heroes in particular. So, if your deck lacks an aspect, if your deck lacks one of these three aspects, speed, power, and defense, you will have an 0-10 or 1-9 matchup against these heroes. And that's not where we want to be, right? We don't want 0-10 matchups. We don't want auto-lose matchups, right? So, because of that, let's talk about the heroes that can meet these criteria. So, basically, let's talk about my personal tier list for Season 4. So in Tier 1, I think there are 3 decks that kind of stand above all the other ones. Namely, Viscera, Oldham, and Kaisa. What do they all have in common? Well, they all possess high defense. They all present a significant amount of power. The Oldham decks nowadays are actually running quite aggro. Viscera has his nutty 4-card hands. Kaisa has blood on her hands. So they all check off the power mark. And they could all close the game in a reasonable amount of time if you're not blocking. So they have defense, speed, and power. Okay. There are many, many decks that I consider in Tier 1.5. These are decks that have 2 of the 3, or they're a little bit... they're positioned in a kind of weird... they have a weird position in the metagame. So, Dorinthia, she's always been good. However, the Tier 1 decks have a ton of armor. In particular, Oldham can be kind of tricky to take down, especially with how much armor he has. Crown of Seeds with the shield. Very, very difficult to take him down. So Dorinthia I consider Tier 1.5 because the Tier 1s are too tanky. Similarly, for Bravo, your first dominated Crippling Crush is never going to hit the Tier 1 heroes because they have the fridge. And Bravo is also quite fragile to Ira. Speaking of Ira basically is not fast enough. She is very consistent, but she doesn't, and she has decent defense because of Flick Flack, but she doesn't close the game out in a particularly fast manner. Her spike turns are basically Kodachi, E-Strike, Snapdragon, CNC, and that just doesn't cut it these days. Still a decent deck, but I'm actually going to say she might even not reach Living Legend. I'd be pretty surprised if she gets quite a few skirmish wins. The other, I guess, old guard of skirmish is Kano. And Kano, some people have said that Kano is dead because of AB5, but I'll show you a little bit later that in the Oldham deck list, there's no room to run AB5. Same thing with Bravo. There's really no room to run AB5. So, but AB4 will become more common. So this basically means that bad Kanos that can't close games against AB4 get pushed out. And just in general, Viscera and Kaisa are pretty quick decks. So the fact that Kano doesn't have any armor as well makes Benji just, Benji could kill Kano on turn 1. And things like Reinhardt can kill Kano on turn 1. So Kano just basically has some issues, but he's still very strong. He got Aether Wildfire, and in the hands of a strong pilot, Kano I think is still very viable. May not be tier 1, but still pretty good. I mentioned Benji a little bit ago. Benji basically he lacks power just because of the nature of his deck. He wants to put in a lot of lower power cards that are unblockable and then combo that with Spring Tidings. However, all the tier 1 heroes have plenty of armor to stop Spring Tidings. And any competent pilot will be able to shut your card draw down pretty easily. Finally, rounding out tier 1.5, we have Chain and Briar. They're not bad, but all the Everfest cards are clearly designed for Viscera, and Chain and Briar are a little bit better in CC because they do some unique things, and they're better at a mid to long game, whereas Blitz is so quick that you kind of want the fastest possible deck, and that will be Viscera. So yeah, that's kind of my general tier list. There are many, many, many heroes in tier 2 and tier 2.5 and tier 3. But if you're looking to go to a skirmish and you're looking to win the skirmish, these are the heroes that I'd be looking at to do so. So now let's take a look at some deck lists and, you know, go through the tier 1 heroes, some of the warriors, and then my dark horse pick. Alright guys, let's just jump right into looking at these deck lists. First up we have Viscera, arguably the best deck in the format at the moment. Got a lot of help in Everfest. Shrill of Skullform, Swarming Gloomveil, Revel in Runeblood. These are just absolute powerhouse cards. This deck has the speed and power to knock out any deck, even Oldham. And this deck has the fridge with the Skullcap, Skelata, Grasp, and Spellbound Creepers, so they have sufficient defense to deal with things like Benji and Dorinthia. This deck is courtesy of Shing, a real OG Viscera player, and this is the list we took to the Team Blitz tournament, and it performed very well. It's very quick. This deck can win out of nowhere, and yeah, this is a very, very well-tuned deck. There are a couple flex slots. Drawn to the Dark Dimension is kind of a card that you could substitute, but other than that, this deck is just playing the powerhouse cards in Viscera and really is just going ham each and every turn. Up next, we got Oldham. Now, this is the list from the Battle Hardened event that went on last week. This was the deck that actually won the event. So, just looking at this deck list, you can see that this is a aggressively slanted Oldham deck. We got Endless Winter, E-Strike, Oaken Old, Spinal Crash, Pulverize, with a Pummel, 2 copies of Pummel. So this is they're basically running 10 red attacks, Pummel, and a plethora of good blue cards like Rouse the Ancients, Tear Asunder, even new cards like Thunderquake, Macho Grande. The Guardian decks have been consistently getting good blue cards, and it has actually upped the power of their deck quite considerably. And just having, you know, cards like Pulverize and Pummel, these really allow them to just get over the line. This deck is running AB3 plus Crown of Seeds, so this is not an AB5 Oldham deck. So this is partly one of the reasons that I think that Kano was still viable. If we saw that the Oldham was their equipment were navigating towards AB5, then that would be bad for Kano. Notably, there is no room in the sideboard for Gambler's Gloves, so this Oldham deck is going to be soft to KO. Whether or not that is a significant portion of the meta still remains to be seen. Alright, so we went over 2 of the 3 top tier decks. So now we're just going to go through... I'm a warrior player. We got to go through my warrior lists. So let's just get right to that. This is the Kaisa deck with a few tweaks that we took to the Battle Hardened. Nathan Crawford piloted that. And he gave me some feedback, so I changed a few cards here and there. But yeah, this is a pretty standard Kaisa deck. You know, running Blade Runner, Hit and Run, Spoils of War for Go Again. We have a couple attack reactions like In the Swing, Out for Blood, and Route to just get damage in. We have Copper Generation in Outland Skirmish, and we have 2 copies of Blood on our hands and 1 copy of Cash-In as the outlets. And this deck just really is all about taking advantage of the Valiant Dynamo and, you know, comboing off. Some tech that I didn't really see going around is the Oath of Steel Gallantry Gold combination here. So against a Turtle Oldham, this is kind of how you take him down. You set up your 6 copper, you set up your Oath of Steel or Blood in Our Hands in Arsenal, you wait to draw the other one. And so in every single other matchup you run the Brave Forge Bracers, but I think against Oldham you run the Gallantry Gold, and this will allow you to shove a ton of damage into him, and there's basically no way he survives that. Yeah, pretty standard list, but this has been tested, and it's been performing very well. Notably, there is no Mentor. Personally, I think that's a little bit of a trap card. It occupies your arsenal, and it puts your deck to... It puts your sabers at 3 or 4. And against certain decks, I mean, they're just going to be able to block for 3 pretty easily. Yeah, I think the Minerva is a slight trap. Still remains to be seen, but for now, I'm not going to run it. Alright, next we have my original love, Dorinthia. She didn't actually get too many goodies in Everfest. The only notable change here is that I am now running Shatter. Shatter is an excellent card to have at least one of, because it's good against all 3 of the top tier decks. You can break Scalata, you can break Rampart of Ram's Head, you can break Valiant Dynamo. It just takes a little bit of setup to do that. Other than that, this is a pretty stock list. I recently changed my 2 energy pot to 1 E-pot 1 time snap, because of the importance of getting a triple hit combo is pretty important. So I felt like having 1 E-pot 1 time snap is better. Other than that, it's a pretty standard list. You just got to pilot this solidly and you'll be fine in most matchups. Alright, can't forget about our boy Bolton. This is a Raiden Bolton build. Basically, this is a conversion from CC Bolton, except this is running Plunder Run because it is legal in Blitz. Pretty standard list. We run, you know, Bolt of Courage, Engulfing Light, Express Lightning, Take Flight, and then we have Valiant Thrust, Battlefield Blitz to follow up. We got a couple attack reactions in Courageous Steelhand Red and Yellow, and Beacon of Victory. And, you know, we have some powerhouse cards like Lumina Ascension and Via the Vanguard. This equipment list is a little bit complicated, so I'll walk you through it here. So basically, if you're playing against Kano, because you look at the this ratio is 20-18-2, right? So if you're playing against Kano and you're going first, it's going to assume that you're going to put pressure on him. So I would actually run the Spell Fray Cloak Gloves along with the Halo and the Snapdragons, of course. That gives you SV4, Spell Void 4. So you basically can block one important source of damage. Generally, that's going to be Aether Flare, Aether Wildfire. And that can save you a ton of damage in the long run. However, if you're going second, that means that they're going to get some damage into you. So then you'd run the Halo with the Null Rune Gloves and Robe and the Snapdragon Scalers. That way you have some AB to block on the turn 1. And then on a critical turn, so you have AB2 normally, but on a critical turn you can combine your Spell Void with your AB and you can block for 4, which is often all you need. Against Kano, obviously this deck is going to want to go as fast as humanly possible. So yeah. Alright, so now that we've talked about 5 different decks, I'm going to show you my Dark Horse pick for Season 4. So my Dark Horse pick for Season 4 is Prism. And the reason for that is that she got a lot of tools in Everfest. And you may not be aware of just how many tools she got in Everfest because everybody's very focused on the new auras that she got. But there are some absolutely nutty cards for Herald aggro. Things like Coalescence Mirage. This one, 7 for 2. Puts an aura into play if it's destroyed. Fractal Replication, which can become whatever Herald you want. We have Protection, Triumph. Plunder Run is legal, so we play it. This card is one of the Everfest commons that Prism got, and it's really quite strong. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of card. A 1 for 4 gives Phantasm, and if it's destroyed, draw a card. So that is pretty good, especially considering you have Phantasmal Footsteps, and Viscera and Kaisa aren't running poppers. So there's gonna be a lot of the time you're just gonna get the Phantasm text doesn't even matter. Then you have things like War Tune Herald, obviously very strong. Just standard stuff, Air Edition, more Plunder Runs, more Veiled Intentions, more Coalescence Mirages, and you run the 2 really strong ones, Passing Mirage and Pierce Reality. So this is kind of where I would start my Prism build. Notably, generally you're going to be running Cross Straps and Goliath Gauntlet if you can get away with it. You may need Dreamweavers against certain decks, but I think you can actually run Goliath Gauntlet against... You just have to know your matchups. If you can, Goliath Gauntlet into an Air Edition, that's basically game. And I think, in general, Heart and Cross Strap is going to get more value than Tunic in a Blitz game. And this allows you to block on an important turn, but still maintain some pressure, which is really, really important. The Crown of Reflection allows you to play AB3, no Rune Gloves, no Rune Robe, plus the Crown and the Footsteps, and you really go ham on those wizards. So yeah, I think this is a really, really underrated deck. I think this is well positioned in the metagame. And yeah, this is a pretty straightforward deck to play and pilot. If you can go first, you get a Plunder Run into Arsenal, and you just kind of go ham basically as you go as fast as you can. So yeah, so let's now that we've talked about all those decks, let's move to the wrap up. All right, so now that we've taken a look at all of those deck lists, let's talk about some key takeaways. So the metagame is restricted in Blitz. because there's no sideboarding. All right. So in order to be a viable deck in Blitz, you need power, speed, and defense. If you lack in one of those three areas, you will have some bad matchups. In particular, I think that Viscera, Oldham, and Kaisa are currently the best positioned decks because they all have power, they all have speed, and they all have defense. A key difference between CC and Blitz is that because you get down to critical life points quicker and just the game length is shorter, this really tests your fundamentals, especially your blocking and when to take your pivot turn. These are fundamental skills for playing Flesh and Blood that get tested quickly, and if you make a mistake in Blitz, oftentimes you just lose. There's really no coming back from it. So yeah, so this is, I think Blitz is actually a very good place to improve your fundamentals because there's a lot of important decisions that have to be made very quickly in that format. So yeah, anyways, I hope that you found this video about the Season 4 Blitz overview helpful. Yeah, so I hope to see you guys at a few of the skirmishes around if possible. Yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good day. See ya.